my past life, I was nothing more than a cover for his disgraceful sibling relationship. On our wedding day, his sister threatened to jump off a building, so he abandoned the ceremony, leaving me alone to face the guests. Later, I got pregnant and gave birth, but his sister played her tricks again, and once more, my husband left me behind. In the end, it all led to a tragic childbirth. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back at the scene of that absurd wedding. This time, I didn't beg him not to leave like before. Instead, I quietly adjusted his suit and told him softly, "Be careful on your way." Shane, holding my hand with an apologetic expression, said, "I'm sorry, Emily." Shane's sister, Samantha, was utterly dependent on him, emotionally and materially. She demanded everything from her brother. Even though I knew Samantha wasn't truly suicidal, Shane still abandoned our wedding to comfort her, leaving me to manage everything alone. I changed into my reception dress and entertained the guests until the end of the ceremony. By the time Shane returned, Samantha had taken her medication and was fine. I remained calm and gracious, saying in a gentle tone, "It's okay. We're married now. And Samantha is my sister too." My words made him stiffen slightly, his expression subtly changing. In my previous life, I had naively walked into this marriage, unaware that I was merely a shield for their inappropriate sibling relationship. Shane and Samantha were half-siblings, growing up under the same roof. Samantha had always been overly attached to him, interfering with his dating life and, eventually, even his marriage. Their father, seeing this, arranged for me and Shane to marry, hoping to preserve Samantha's reputation. Shane, unwilling to disgrace her, reluctantly agreed to the marriage. After we married, they were practically inseparable. On several occasions, when I wasn't around, they even shared the same room overnight. Shane's father refused to let me divorce, citing family honor, and I endured over 1,000 agonizing days in this suffocating marriage. When I got pregnant, I thought things might improve, but Samantha's retaliation only intensified. During my pregnancy, she attempted to harm me multiple times, almost causing a miscarriage. When I finally went into labor, Samantha deliberately lured Shane away, leaving me stranded in an isolated mountain area without any phone signal. Both my child and I died that day. Fate played a cruel joke on me, sending me back to the beginning. After the wedding, we returned home, where Samantha was sitting barefoot in the living room. Shane immediately rushed to her, full of concern. "Samantha, why aren't you wearing shoes? It's so cold. You'll catch a chill," he said, warming her feet with his hands. Samantha shot me a defiant look, but I just smiled and returned to my room. I knew this wedding night, which should have been mine, now belonged to her. As expected, Shane didn't return that night. He was busy comforting his sister. The next morning, the household staff prepared breakfast. When I walked out, I saw Shane feeding milk to Samantha, who, despite being in her 20s, acted like a child. "You're the best, brother," she said in a coy voice. Shane, noticing me, quickly poured a glass of milk for me as well. "Emily, come and have breakfast." I sat beside him and picked up a piece of toast, but Samantha snapped, "That's for me. Shane made it especially for me. You're not allowed to eat it." Quietly put it down, and she smirked triumphantly, dragging the knife across the toast. She made a sharp, grating noise that reminded me of how she had trampled all over me in my previous life. Without hesitation, I stood up, overturned my plate onto the floor, and left the room. Samantha started crying instinctively, but I had already lost my appetite. "I'm leaving," I said coldly. "Spend more time with your sister." Shane was stunned, not expecting the once docile me to change so drastically. "Emily, where are you going?" he asked. I picked up my bag and smiled. "To work. Of course. Since the Shane family only saw me as a cover, I might as well make the most of it. After all, the shares and money they gave me when we married were real assets. I intended to use them to grow my influence." When I arrived at the office, Shane's father seemed surprised. "Emily, you have a month of leave for your honeymoon. Why not take some time off with Shane?" he asked with his usual hypocritical smile. In my previous life, he had threatened to kill my parents if I dared divorce Shane. To cover up his daughter's scandal. He sacrificed my happiness without hesitation. The Shane family truly had no redeeming qualities. But now, I smiled sweetly and replied, Dad, I just couldn't stop thinking about how hard you've been working. I wanted to come back and help. He was delighted. You're much more capable than my own children. I've already arranged for your new office to be renovated. If there's any furniture you like, let the secretary know, and we'll have it purchased. Later, as I was settling into my office, an assistant brought me tea and casually mentioned, I just saw Mr. Shane book 2 tickets to Tokyo Disneyland. Emily, you're so lucky. I stayed calm. Those tickets were certainly not for me. Shane must have bought them to appease Samantha. Before leaving, Samantha dropped several hints to provoke me, but I ignored her. Shane, feeling guilty, asked, Emily, what gift would you like me to bring back from Japan? I smiled warmly and said, I don't need anything. Just don't overwork yourself. He seemed touched and replied, I'm sorry for making you feel wronged by marrying me. While helping him pack, I casually asked, how's that deal with Mr. Lewis going? He hesitated before replying, why do you ask? You never cared about my work before. I noticed how busy you've been and thought I could help. I said, since our marriage, Samantha had monopolized his time, leaving him with no energy for work. To him, I was a convenient solution. Shane handed me the documents for the deal with Mr. Lewis, saying, he's a tough negotiator. I smiled inwardly. This time, I would turn the situation to my advantage. If you can't handle it, Shane said, glancing at the documents, just wait for me to come back. I quickly replied, let me give it a try. If it doesn't work out, it won't affect you much. We hadn't even spoken for 10 minutes before Samantha knocked on the door. Brother, she called sweetly, will you watch a movie with me? Without hesitation, Shane put down the documents and left with her. The two of them had their own private hideaway, a theater room in the basement with a starry sky ceiling. Samantha insisted on having her brother accompany her every time she watched a movie. No one else was allowed inside, not even Shane's parents. When Samantha was in a bad mood, Shane would spend entire nights in there comforting her. As expected, he didn't come back that night. I didn't care in the slightest. Early the next morning, I got up and went to work. With my experience from my previous life, I quickly became proficient in handling the company's operations. While Shane was off vacationing in Japan with Samantha, I stayed by Shane's father's side, managing business affairs. My professional knowledge and keen insight earned me his recognition and trust in no time. Shane's father often sighed, lamenting, I've raised 2 children, but neither is as reliable as my daughter-in-law. When Samantha returned from Japan, she was in high spirits, flaunting a necklace Shane had bought for her. Sister-in-law, did you know? My brother and I spent 3 days at Disneyland. We tried every ride and even bought matching rings. Her face was a picture of smug satisfaction, feigning admiration. I said, it's beautiful. It really suits your complexion. She froze for a moment, clearly not expecting me to remain so composed. Recovering quickly, she added sarcastically, I feel bad, sister-in-law. This trip was supposed to be your honeymoon with Shane, but he left you behind to accompany me. Closing the folder in my hands, I turned to her with a calm smile. It's fine, Samantha, as long as it's something you want. I won't compete with you, but what I want, I'll make sure your family compensates me for, piece by piece. Unable to provoke me further, Samantha sulked and left. From that point on, our household developed a peculiar dynamic. I played the role of the forgiving and magnanimous wife, turning a blind eye to their antics. Samantha, desperate to prove her importance to Shane, acted out incessantly, while he continued to dote on her without limits. Their behavior grew increasingly blatant in front of me. Shane's parents didn't live with us full-time, visiting only occasionally, though they seemed to sense something was off. My efforts to maintain appearances ensured they didn't dig deeper. Shane, feeling guilty for neglecting me, introduced more clients to me, and my workload grew heavier. Sometimes I stayed overnight at the office. Shane's father's health began to decline, requiring frequent hospital visits. I accompanied him regularly, taking care of appointments, prescriptions, and checkups. Even the attending physician once remarked, "Mr. Shane, your daughter is so considerate." His smile faltered momentarily. His own daughter was nothing like me, and he knew it, but he didn't correct the doctor. Perhaps, in his heart, he was beginning to accept me as a substitute daughter. I hadn't forgotten, though, how in my previous life, he had coerced me into staying with Shane. One day, after another hospital visit, Shane's father hesitated before speaking. "Emily, I know marrying Shane has been difficult for you. Your relationship is still rocky, but once you have a child, everything will get better. Our family cannot be without an heir. You should put in some effort." Outwardly, I appeared obedient, but inwardly, I sneered. With someone as unstable as Samantha around, having a child would only lead to the same tragic ending as before. During a family dinner, the topic of children came up again. Samantha immediately exploded. "You can't have children. In this world, the only person my brother can love the most is me." Shane quickly tried to calm her. "Samantha, don't be upset. Dad was just joking." Samantha wasn't appeased. She demanded, "Swear to me. Swear that if you ever have a child, you'll meet a terrible end." Helplessly, Shane did as she asked. I found it laughable. In my previous life, Shane and I had a child, and yet it was me and my baby who met a terrible fate. It seemed those who committed heinous acts faced no consequences, while the innocent continued to suffer. Shane's father finally lost his patience and slammed the table. "Samantha, I've had enough of your nonsense. Your brother and sister-in-law have been more than indulgent with you. If this family has no heir, the fault will lie squarely with you." Samantha stormed up to her father, yelling defiantly. Without hesitation, he slapped her. Chaos ensued. Samantha, already emotionally unstable, burst into tears and tantrums. Shane scrambled to console her. Dinner was left unfinished, while Shane's parents fumed silently. I struggled to keep a straight face and suppress my laughter. I dropped off Shane's parents at their house, then went out for a late-night snack. After wandering around to clear my head, I returned home. When I opened the door, I found Samantha curled up in Shane's arms on the couch. They were bathed in dim light, creating an intimate atmosphere that was almost too delicate to interrupt. Samantha's tear-streaked face showed she'd cried herself to sleep. Shane stayed in the same position, holding her. I quietly handed him a pillow and went to my room. The next morning, I got up feeling refreshed. Shane, however, looked utterly drained, dark circles under his eyes as he washed up. I handed him a glass of honey water. "Don't go to work today. Stay home and take care of Samantha." He nodded wearily. "Thank you for understanding." "Not at all," I replied, smiling. I had more important matters to attend to. The elusive Mr. Lewis, who had evaded me for weeks, had finally agreed to a meeting. At the office, I reviewed the negotiation materials before heading to Mr. Lewis's company. Young, accomplished, and notoriously difficult, Mr. Lewis would be a crucial turning point for my plans. I had scheduled meetings with Mr. Lewis at least 10 times, only to be rejected every single time. This time, I managed to secure a meeting by leveraging some connections. When the appointed time came, I waited in the conference room for half an hour before he finally appeared. The moment Mr. Lewis walked in, the pressure in the room seemed to spike. His imposing presence was undeniable. His assistant politely brought me a cup of coffee and apologized. "Miss Zhou, thank you for waiting." I set down the materials I had prepared and said, "I appreciate your time. These are the details about our company. Please take a look." Mr. Lewis barely glanced at the documents before responding coolly. "You know I already have a partnership with the Shen family, yet you dare openly pitch me a deal." I had expected this reaction. Maintaining my composure, I replied, "Mr. Lewis, I understand your concerns. Let me be clear. I'm not here on behalf of the Shen family. I built my own team when I started working at the Shen Corporation. We've grown to a point where we can take on independent contracts. Over the past months, I had used resources provided through Shane to secure smaller projects. However, those smaller contracts were no longer sufficient for scaling my team. If I could secure a deal with Mr. Lewis, I would have enough leverage to establish my independence completely. Business is about profit," I continued. If I can offer you a lower price and better service, wouldn't choosing my team be your optimal decision? In today's economic climate, most companies are focusing on cost reduction and efficiency improvements. Mr. Lewis gave a cold chuckle. Profit matters. Yes, but I value stability and competence even more. How long do you think your hastily assembled team can provide me with reliable service? I knew his skepticism was reasonable. Mr. Lewis, my team is willing to work for you without compensation until you're satisfied. Here, I said, flipping to the final page of my proposal, are examples of past projects we've completed. I've handled independent contracts myself and delivered results. You won't be taking a loss by giving us a chance. Perhaps my sincerity moved him. Mr. Lewis finally relented, agreeing to give us 3 months. If he was satisfied with our work, he promised a 3-year contract. I left his office feeling victorious, my gratitude immense. That night, I worked late, returning home only to hear laughter echoing from the basement theater where Shane and Samantha were once again spending time together. The sound made my skin crawl, and I quickly retreated to my room to sleep. For the next few days, I threw myself into work, often staying at the office until the early hours of the morning. Without my presence at home, Shane and Samantha became even bolder in their behavior. One day, a neighbor joked, "Miss Jo, if you weren't around, I would have thought those 2 siblings were a married couple." I merely smiled, not bothering to respond. After all, wasn't that what they wanted? To play husband and wife? I decided to let them have their way. During this time, I essentially lived at the office, pouring all my energy into leading my team and perfecting our projects. Even Shane's father, who had always been critical, couldn't find any fault with my work. Since the disastrous family dinner, he had stopped pressuring us to have children, likely fearing that another public meltdown from Samantha would tarnish the family's reputation irreparably. With the money I saved during this period, I bought my parents a larger house and invested in several properties. My mother, unaware of the Shun siblings' twisted dynamic, noticed my unhappiness and asked gently, "Emily, be honest with me. Are you and Shane having problems?" I dismissed her worries with a casual, "No, everything's fine. Don't worry about me." She held my hand tightly. "We've saved all the money you've sent us. If things ever become unbearable, your father and I are here for you." I nodded firmly. My parents were the only people I could truly rely on in this world. As for Shane and Samantha, they were nothing more than stepping stones in my path to success. My relentless focus on work eventually caught Shane's attention. He began to notice how detached I had become from our home life, feeling a sense of unease. He approached me one evening and said, "Emily, you don't need to work so hard. I earn more than enough for us to live comfortably." I quickly brought up Samantha. "Your sister's still emotionally unstable. You should stay home and take care of her." Deep down, I knew Samantha's obsessive need for Shane was becoming a strain on him. Their relationship, born out of dependence, had grown complicated over the years, but even the strongest bond couldn't withstand the erosion of time. We had barely exchanged a few sentences when Samantha barged in, grabbing Shane's arm. "Brother, I want to see the ocean. Will you take me?" I seized the opportunity. "It's perfect timing," I said with a smile. I happen to have 2 vouchers for a hot spring resort near the coast. After seeing the ocean, you can relax in the hot springs. Samantha looked at me with disdain but still took the tickets. "At least you know your place," she sneered. "I've been meaning to try a hot spring anyway." I smirked internally. I had deliberately chosen the most expensive and remote resort, ensuring they would be gone for several days. By the time they returned, I planned to have secured Mr. Lewis's contract. Shane hesitated. "A week is a long time. Samantha, I have work to do." Samantha shot me a glare before turning back to Shane. "Just let her handle it. She's so eager to take over everything anyway." I chimed in. "Exactly. Leave the company to me. These tickets weren't easy to get. It would be a shame to waste them." Despite his reluctance, Shane wavered under Samantha's usual theatrics. She pouted, her eyes welling up with tears. "I don't care. I want to go." It was the same manipulative tactic she had used countless times before. However, it seemed less effective now. For once, Shane hesitated. "Samantha, let me finish some work first." Let's finish up this busy period. And then I'll take you. Okay. It's the end of the year. And there's so much to handle. Plus, Emily can't manage everything alone, Shane said, seemingly concerned. That single sentence, which appeared to show consideration, was the trigger for Samantha's descent into madness. Her obsessive control over Shane had become second nature. She was used to his unwavering obedience. I sighed quietly. What a pity. If you two don't go, I'll just give the tickets to someone else. Samantha shot me a venomous glare. Who said we're not going? Grabbing Shane's hand, she dragged him toward the window. If you don't take me, I'll jump right now. In front of you. Shane panicked, immediately offering apologies and promises to take her. In the end, they left the house together, sneaking away without informing Shane's parents. I covered for them, ensuring no one noticed their absence. The same week they left was also the final week of my agreement with Mr. Lewis. My team and I delivered a flawless result ahead of schedule, successfully securing a 3-year contract. After signing, Mr. Lewis transferred the first payment. With this startup capital, I now had the confidence to leave the Shun family for good, taking my team with me. My assistant, aware of my intentions, hesitated before asking, Miss Zhou, I noticed the office building next door is renting spaces. Should we start scouting locations? I set my pen down. No rush. There's still one final bomb that hasn't gone off yet. In my past life, my death had been the perfect cover for the siblings' scandalous relationship. After my passing, Shane publicly declared that his heartbreak prevented him from ever remarrying. Samantha then openly moved into our marital home under the guise of caring for her grieving brother. The two of them lived as if they were husband and wife, happier than anyone, though without children to show for it. This time, I had used the Shun family's resources to secure my own independence. Now that I had my own career, I would eventually break free. But before that, they would pay. Shane's father was hospitalized for bronchitis, and I visited him daily, bringing soup and checking in on his condition. Where are Shane and Samantha? He asked one day. I haven't seen them around lately. Feigning unease, I replied, perhaps they're busy with something. He frowned, growing angry. What kind of behavior is this? You're his wife, and you can't even keep track of your husband. I inwardly sneered. And you, as their father, haven't exactly done a stellar job keeping them in line. Trying to pacify him, I offered him a bowl of soup. Don't worry, sir. I'm managing the company in Shane's absence. Pulling out a proposal from my bag, I said, the end of the year is approaching, and I've prepared plans for the company's annual banquet. This year, since it's winter, how about hosting it at the hot springs in Lingshan? The surrounding area has plenty of luxury hotels and scenic spots. After dinner, everyone can unwind and enjoy the hot springs. Trusting me completely, Shane's father entrusted the entire event to me. I finalized the guest list, reserved rooms and spa spots at the hotel, and calculated the timing perfectly. I knew Shane and Samantha would still be at the resort during the banquet. On the day of the event, I arrived early at the hot springs. This particular spa offered mixed bathing sessions, each slot accommodating up to 30 guests. I ensured the timing coincided with the siblings' bath, arranging for the hotel manager to clear the area and provide tickets to several key business partners, including Mr. Lewis. Leading a group of distinguished guests, I accidentally barged into the hot springs where the siblings were enjoying their time together. The sight that greeted everyone was shocking. Samantha, wrapped in a towel, clung to Shane in the steaming water, their intimacy unmistakable. Shane's father, seeing his children in such a compromising situation, collapsed on the spot. The other business partners exchanged glances, their unspoken knowledge of the rumors now blatantly confirmed. Mr. Lewis crossed his arms, watching the scene unfold with amused detachment. Samantha, enraged, stormed out of the pool wrapped in her towel and charged toward me. You wretched woman. You set me up. I'll kill you. Shane hurriedly restrained her, struggling to keep her under control. Feigning heartbreak, I said softly, Samantha, I've always treated you like my own sister. I never expected you to do something like this. Regardless, you and Shane are related by blood. This is a twisted kind of love. Shane's face darkened as he glared at me. Emily, I never thought you could be so malicious. I shot back coldly. And who are you to judge what kind of person I am? Samantha still tried to lunge at me, but Shane dragged her back to their room. With my goal accomplished, I helped Shane's father to the hospital and made sure he was taken care of before returning to the hotel. As expected, the scandal spread like wildfire. Did you hear? The Shun siblings' relationship isn't ordinary. I know. How can a brother and sister behave like that? Don't they care about appearances? Apparently, this has been going on since before Shane got married. No wonder his father is so furious he fell ill. Hearing the whispers around me, I smiled in satisfaction. This was exactly the outcome I wanted. Later that evening, Shane found me, his face a mixture of anger and frustration. Emily, what is the meaning of this? You deliberately arranged for us to be there, didn't you? Was this all just to humiliate us? I gazed out at the misty peaks of Lingshan in the distance, their hazy outlines shrouded in white fog. It reminded me of my previous life, trapped in an endless maze, crashing blindly through the fog. Looking back now, those mountains that had once seemed so insurmountable were nothing but small, fleeting obstacles. The fog, too, was merely an illusion, designed to obscure the truth. My life has never been anyone's cover-up, and my destiny will never serve as a springboard for others. Shane, everyone must bear the consequences of their choices. His voice was sharp as he spoke. Now that you've ruined Samantha and me, are you happy? I corrected him calmly. I didn't ruin you. You did it to yourselves. From the very beginning, Shane had failed to set boundaries in his relationship with his sister. He allowed her to develop feelings she shouldn't have. And now the damage was irreversible. Samantha's mentally collapsing now. Are you trying to drive her crazy? He demanded. I let out a cold laugh. Don't worry. She won't lose her mind. In fact, this might just be the outcome she wanted. Someone like Samantha, with her obsessive and chaotic nature, doesn't care about public opinion or societal values. All she knows is that this scandal has rendered our marriage meaningless. She can now enjoy having you all to herself without restraint. She's probably thrilled. But you're different. Shane, I continued. You're the eldest son of the Shun family, raised as an heir. You're bound by the weight of public opinion and moral expectations. A secret affair might have been thrilling, but exposing it to the world is devastating for you. That's the real breaking point between you and Samantha. Shane's father, furious and overwhelmed, had been hospitalized again. Meanwhile, I carried on with the annual company banquet as planned. Outwardly, everything remained calm and orderly. I ensured the guests were well fed and entertained while allowing the scandal to ferment in the background. Occasionally, I even added fuel to the fire by feeding harmless but provocative rumors to the right circles. Once everything was set into motion, I finally took a moment to relax, sitting by the hotel window with a cup of tea and admiring the mountain scenery. Lingshan was particularly beautiful this season. The frost-covered trees on the mountains sparkled like snow-covered emeralds. As I sipped my tea, someone sat down across from me. I glanced up and saw Mr. Lewis. His tone carried a hint of admiration as he remarked, "Decisive and efficient. You understand the art of striking precisely where it hurts. You have guts." "Thank you, Mr. Lewis," I replied with a polite smile. He took a sip of his tea and said, "I've heard the best white tea from Lingshan is locally produced and never sold to outsiders." He glanced at the tea in my cup, his expression contemplative. I called over the server and ordered him a cup of the same tea. "That's correct. The production is limited, and it's usually not for sale. But I'm the owner, so I can offer you a cup, Mr. Lewis." Mr. Lewis showed no surprise. From the first time we met, he seemed to understand what kind of person I was. Someone with a calm mind, a sweet tongue, and ruthless methods. These were lessons I had learned the hard way in my previous life. "So, this stunt has probably ended your marriage with Shane, hasn't it?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "Not necessarily. We never registered the marriage officially." "Oh." His curiosity was piqued. "When we got married, Samantha was so insistent on preventing it from being legally binding that she threatened to end her life. In the end, the paperwork was delayed and never completed. In hindsight, it saved me a lot of trouble." Mr. Lewis traced the steam rising from his cup with his fingertips as if trying to grasp something intangible. His face was as composed as ever, his sharp eyes betraying a faint glimmer of interest, much like a predator eyeing its prey. "So, you're single now?" he asked. I shrugged. "Single or not, it doesn't matter much to me." His lips curled into a warm smile as he pulled out a business card. "It matters to me." The card bore a private number he hadn't shared before, a clear signal that our relationship could take a new turn. Without another word, he stood and left, his departure deliberate, leaving an air of intrigue in his wake. After finishing my tea, I went upstairs to check on Samantha. She was lying in bed, with Shane coaxing her to eat some porridge. "Please, Samantha, eat something. For me," he pleaded, his voice weary. She pouted stubbornly, refusing to open her mouth. When she saw me enter, her expression turned vicious. "You bitch, what are you doing here? Get out." I clapped my hands lightly and said with mock concern, "I'm just here to remind you both that your father is still in the hospital. Maybe you should care a little about whether he lives or dies." Shane's father had narrowly escaped danger, only to collapse again when he learned that the family scandal was spreading like wildfire. The doctors had stabilized him for now, but he woke up shouting about his shame and guilt, lamenting that he could no longer face his ancestors. The chaos in the Shun family had become the talk of the elite social circles, with rumors flying for an entire month. It was everything I had hoped for. After the scandal broke, I quickly packed my belongings and moved back in with my parents. They stood firmly by my side, urging me to sever all ties with the Shun family. Shane's father, weakened by his illness, had no energy left to manage the company. Shane, burdened by the fallout and Samantha's constant demands, struggled to focus on work. The Shun Group's business took a sharp downturn. Desperate, Shane eventually swallowed his pride and asked me to return to help. But by then, I had already rented an office in the neighboring building, establishing my own company. I started my own company with the team I had built and took along many of the clients I had brought from the Shun family. Now, the majority of them were my core clients. "Shane, when you decided to use me for your benefit, you should have known this day would come. Emily, no matter what you say, without the Shun family, you wouldn't be where you are today." Shane pleaded. "For the sake of old times, can't you come back and help me?" "For the sake of old times?" I sneered internally. "Did you think about old times when you let me die in the last life?" I gave him a straightforward response. "From now on, we'll go our separate ways." Defeated, Shane left in humiliation. After that, I didn't bother keeping tabs on the Shun family situation. All I heard was that the company was struggling and that Shane eventually had to sell it at a low price. As for me, my life was entering a brand new chapter. Wealth, status, and a thriving career were now mine. I could do whatever I wanted. Mr. Lewis had recently been visiting my company frequently, often using business discussions as an excuse to ask me out to dinner. Even my secretary noticed. "Miss Zhou, do you think Mr. Lewis likes you?" I simply smiled without answering. Men's affection is often superficial. It wasn't until I became successful that he started to see me in a different light. His liking me was nothing more than fascination with the novelty of a woman who could rise against the odds. My approach to him was clear, neither actively pursuing nor rejecting him. Accepting his invitations was harmless, but I had no intention of chasing love. Even if I were to enter another marriage, it would have to be on my own terms. Mr. Lewis, ever patient, showered me with resources, introducing me to his network and connecting me with influential business leaders to expand my career. In return, I provided him with the best services within my capability. After all, mutual benefit is the foundation of any lasting relationship. Finally, unable to hold back, he asked, "What are you really thinking?" I thought for a moment before replying seriously. "Mr. Lewis, if I entered your circle as your woman and enjoyed your resources, what would happen to those resources if we were to part ways? Wouldn't they be immediately taken back?" He paused, momentarily stunned, because he knew the answer was yes. Romantic relationships are the most unreliable thing in this world. In my last life, once I lost my value to the Shun family, even my death didn't evoke a shred of sorrow from them. That's why I vowed to become someone valuable in my own right. not someone who relied on others to climb the ladder. This was the epiphany I had the moment I was reborn. Mr. Lewis's appreciation for me was rooted in my value. It wasn't until I stood as his equal that I became someone worth noticing and liking. He tried to reassure me. Wanting a career and my affection doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. I gazed at the horizon, where Lingshan remained as breathtaking as ever. The mountain peaks were shrouded in mist, bathed in the ethereal glow of moonlight. The scenery hadn't changed, but the way I saw it had. In the past, all I saw was an endless maze of fog-covered peaks. Now, I saw the extraordinary beauty of the mountains. Perhaps Mr. Lewis still didn't understand what I truly wanted. Was it a love between equals? A relationship founded on mutual respect and shared strength? Or perhaps it was the courage to meet someone at the summit of life. Eye to eye. These were choices I couldn't make in my last life. On the night I died in the wilderness with my unborn child, I saw the mist of Lingshan rising from the valleys, flowing endlessly into the moonlit sky. In that moment, I realized that the universe had always been giving me a sign. Even when trapped in dire circumstances, I could still fight to survive. Mr. Lewis might make an excellent partner, but he wasn't what I truly desired. That's why he kept asking me, over and over, what I was pursuing. What I've been chasing all along is the freedom to choose. Welcome to Tiny Storytime YT channel. Daily updates of satisfying and completed stories. Don't forget to subscribe. The story begins. After spending 6 months on a business trip abroad, I returned home only to discover that the new colleague at my company seemed incapable of following simple instructions. When I told her to print documents, she made photocopies instead. When I asked her to book a hotel for a client, she reserved a cheap hostel. The worst came when I instructed her to take my car in for maintenance, and she somehow managed to damage my brakes. This led to a car accident that cost me my life. In my final moments, stuck inside my wrecked car, the dashcam fell loose and began replaying footage. To my horror, I saw her together with my husband. It was then that I realized she wasn't just misunderstanding me, it was all deliberate. "Lily, you never told me to book a specific hotel for the client," said Jennifer, her tone laced with mock innocence. "What's wrong with the hostel I booked? Isn't it technically still a hotel? Or do you think anyone who stays in a hostel isn't human?" The speaker was none other than Jennifer, the fresh-faced college graduate our company hired 6 months ago. She had a naive look in her eyes that some might find endearing. But her words, dripping with venom, told a very different story. I stared at her in disbelief. This scene was painfully familiar. It was exactly what had unfolded a month ago when I returned from my trip. Realization struck me like lightning. I had been reborn. The awareness sent a surge of sharp clarity through me. Clenching my fists tightly, I retorted coldly, "Are you stupid? You booked a dingy hostel for our most important client. What on earth do you have in that head of yours? Did all the knowledge you supposedly learned in college go straight to the dogs? Or are you just pretending to be innocent while making such amateur mistakes?" Jennifer's eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling. I didn't mean to. I was just trying to save the company money." "Save money? Who do you think you are to make decisions for my company?" I cut her off sharply. "If you're incapable of doing your job, pack your things and leave. I'm not running a charity for incompetents who haven't even weaned themselves yet." The rebuke left her stunned. Her usual facade of pitiful innocence faltered for a moment before returning in full force. Complete with quivering lips and teary eyes, the act drew the sympathy of the male colleagues around us, just as it had in my previous life. "Come on, Miss Taylor," one of them interjected. "She didn't mean any harm. She's just a recent graduate, still learning the ropes. She was only trying to help save costs," another chimed in. Before my rebirth, I had gone abroad for 6 months to close a major deal for the company. When I returned, I learned that my husband, who also managed the company, had hired Jennifer as a business assistant to help lighten our workload. Initially, I saw no issue with her. Sure, she made mistakes, but I thought it was normal for someone fresh out of college. I patiently taught her how to do things correctly, even if it meant doing her tasks myself in the end. The turning point came when I asked her to add a watermark to a PDF. Instead of the company name, she added her own. I finally snapped and reprimanded her. Unexpectedly, she started crying. which instantly garnered sympathy from the entire office, including my husband. He brushed it off, saying she was just a girl from a poor rural background who hadn't seen much of the world. Out of pity, I decided to tolerate her. But my patience was tested when I trusted her with a critical task: booking accommodations for a visiting client. Instead of securing a proper hotel, she reserved a rundown hostel for $10 a night. She defended herself tearfully, saying, "I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. Hostels are for people too, aren't they?" I was livid and ready to fire her on the spot, but my husband intervened, reminding me of her disadvantaged background. Once again, I relented, thinking I could train her to become capable eventually. This misplaced kindness ultimately cost me my life. When my brakes failed on the highway after she supposedly arranged for my car's maintenance, I learned the horrible truth from the dashcam footage. She and my husband had conspired to kill me, tampering with my car to ensure my death. I barely crawled out of the wreckage, consumed by fury. Before I could call the police or seek help, I was struck by an oncoming truck, ending my life for good. I stared coldly at the colleagues who had spoken up for Jennifer. When I assigned the task, I specifically emphasized that this was our most important client. I clearly said to book a 5-star hotel. 5 stars. Did you not understand me? Or do you expect to pay for losing this client out of your own salaries? Few agree. Then fine. Let's move on. The moment I mentioned their salaries, those self-proclaimed defenders fell silent. They were quick to speak up on her behalf when it didn't affect them, but the mere mention of a personal loss made them retreat like timid quails. The so-called heroes suddenly lost their courage. I didn't waste my time on them anymore, nor did I care to argue further with Jennifer. Watching her cry crocodile tears, I said coldly, "Stop pretending to be pitiful. I'm not a man, and your act won't work on me. Pack your things and get out." Jennifer panicked for real this time. She dropped the pretense and begged, "Miss Taylor, you can't fire me. What will I do without this job? How will I live? And I still have student loans to repay. Please, don't fire me." I felt no sympathy. That's none of my business. Besides, didn't I help you with your education? You're just using your loans as another excuse to play the victim. Jennifer's tears flowed even harder, but I was unmoved. I instructed HR to process her dismissal immediately. However, the HR director hesitated, saying, "Miss Taylor, Jennifer was hired by Mr. Campbell. Wouldn't firing her directly cause some issues?" Before I could respond, a man walked into the office. His presence drew everyone's attention. He glanced at the gathered crowd and frowned. "Why is everyone standing here instead of working?" That man was none other than Ryan Campbell, my husband of 5 years and my partner of 10. We met in college, dated for 5 years, and then got married. I had ignored his lack of wealth and cared more about his future than he did himself. I even used my dowry and my family's connections to help him build this company. But the man I had sacrificed so much for betrayed me. He cheated on me with Jennifer, one of the students we had sponsored, and even conspired with her to kill me. This time, having been reborn, I swore to make him pay. Before I could say anything, Jennifer ran toward him, crying even harder. "Mr. Campbell, thank goodness you're here. Please help me. Miss Taylor wants to fire me." Ryan's expression darkened immediately. "What? Lily, why are you firing Jennifer? Don't you know how hard it was for her to rise out of poverty? She's just a young girl from a struggling background. How can you be so cruel?" As soon as the words left his mouth, I raised my hand and slapped him across the face. I had been itching to do this the moment I saw him, and now that I had, I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. The sound of the slap silenced the entire office. Everyone was stunned, including Jennifer, who looked completely dumbfounded. Ryan was the first to react, shielding Jennifer behind him. "Lily, how could you hit me?" he snapped. "Have you lost your mind? Why did you do that?" I sneered. "Have you lost your mind? Ryan, you hired someone this incompetent, and now you're defending her? And you have the audacity to call me cruel? Why don't you ask her what a mess she's made this time?" Ryan, still trying to defend her, said, "Jennifer is just an assistant. How much damage could she possibly do?" That moment, Tom, one of our senior sales managers, couldn't hold back any longer. He stepped forward and explained, "Mr. Campbell, Miss Taylor has every right to be angry. This time, the client in question is the heir to Huakong Corporation, our most critical partner. They've been with us since our company was struggling to stay afloat. That young master is used to luxury and was furious when he saw the hostel we arranged for him. He stormed out and took his team with him. Now they're refusing to communicate with us." Ryan's face paled. He knew just how important Huakong was to our business. While not our biggest account by volume, they were instrumental in attracting other clients over the years. Losing them could jeopardize everything we built. Jennifer, sensing Ryan's growing anxiety, quickly started crying again. "Mr. Campbell, I didn't know. I really didn't know Huakong needed such a fancy hotel. I'm sorry. It's my fault for being poor and inexperienced. For not understanding the ways of the wealthy." Her pitiful demeanor seemed to soothe Ryan's anger. He reassured her, "Don't think that way. You'll learn these things as you gain experience. Just work closely with your colleagues to pick up the ropes." Jennifer nodded obediently. "Yes, Mr. Campbell. I'll do my best to learn from you and the others." Her act completely disarmed him. Turning to me, he said, "Lily, she's apologized. This was just a small misunderstanding. Can't you let it go?" I glared at him coldly. "Ryan, I've noticed something. You seem unusually protective of her." Caught off guard, his expression shifted into one of guilty irritation. "What nonsense are you spouting? I'm just trying to look out for a young girl new to the workforce. She doesn't have it easy." He paused, then added, "But she did make a mistake this time. Jennifer, apologize to Miss Taylor properly." Jennifer obediently stepped forward, bowing her head slightly. "I'm sorry, Miss Taylor. It was all my fault. I grew up poor and don't understand high-class expectations. Please forgive me this once." Her words sounded apologetic, but the mocking look in her eyes as she glanced at me betrayed her true feelings. Ryan, oblivious or deliberately ignorant, turned to me and said firmly, "She's apologized. That should settle things. Don't be upset," Ryan said, his tone softening. "The situation is what it is now. Blaming her won't solve anything. What matters is figuring out how to salvage the relationship with the client, not assigning blame. You should personally apologize to Huakong and ask for their forgiveness. Then this issue will be resolved." I let out a laugh, the kind born of sheer disbelief. "Oh, really? She's the one who caused this disaster. And now you want me to go apologize? What do you take me for? Her mom or her dad?" Ryan frowned slightly but kept his patience. "Lily, I know you're angry, and I get it, but don't be so unreasonable. Think of the company. And let's not forget that as head of the sales department, you're responsible for assigning such an important task to a new hire. If something went wrong, it's partly your fault too. So yes, it's also on you to fix this." His words, turning the blame back on me, sent a chill through my veins. This man had a remarkable way of twisting things. After a long pause, I finally nodded. "Fine. I'll go to Huakong myself. But let me remind you, the damage is done. If they don't forgive us, there's nothing I can do." Ryan seemed relieved and smiled faintly. "That's all I ask." But when he caught the cold, calculating look in my eyes, he faltered, Why are you looking at me like that?" "Lily." I withdrew my gaze and said flatly, "It's nothing. I'll head to Zhejiang now." I left the office as if heading for the airport, but instead of going to Zhejiang, I went straight to a private investigator. Fate had given me a second chance. I wouldn't let these two snakes get away with anything. But before I exacted my revenge, I needed to be fully prepared. This company, which I had built with my own hands, would not fall into their grasp. My resources, my money, my network, they would get none of it. And anything they had gained thus far, I would take it all back, leaving them with nothing. After instructing the investigator to keep a close eye on Ryan and Jennifer, I finally called Huakong. That's when I learned the full extent of Jennifer's screw-ups. Not only had she booked a hostel, but she had also spilled coffee all over Mr. Xia, the young heir to Huakong. The representative on the other end even chuckled bitterly. "Miss Taylor, if your company doesn't want to work with us, just say so. But sending someone so clueless to deal with us is outright insulting." I was stunned. Jennifer was supposedly Ryan's lover. Yet she had botched things this badly? Were these two really working together? Or was Jennifer playing her own game? I quickly apologized to Hua Kong and managed to leverage our long-standing partnership to smooth things over. Thankfully, they were willing to forgive us, but only on the condition that Jennifer be fired. Sighing, I replied, "That might be difficult. My husband seems quite attached to her. Firing her won't be easy." The Hua Kong representative paused, then asked, "If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Campbell is your husband, right?" I let out a sarcastic laugh. Who else would it be? They didn't press further. We were all smart enough to read between the lines. Instead, they asked if I needed any help. Relieved, I outlined my plan. "No, I don't need you to do anything drastic. Just make things a little harder for my company for now." After settling this, I returned to the office and relayed Hua Kong's stance to Ryan. "Mr. Xie insists that Jennifer must be fired, or they'll end the partnership." Jennifer, standing off to the side, bit her lip and muttered, "That's impossible. All this over a hotel mix-up? Surely they're not that petty. Or maybe, Miss Taylor, you didn't apologize to them properly, did you?" Her words made my eyes narrow. A simple hotel mix-up? Was that really all that happened? Ryan hesitated. What else could there be? Jennifer's face turned pale as she stammered, "Miss Taylor, if you didn't want to apologize, just say so. There's no need to frame me like this." Before she could finish, I played an audio recording I had arranged with Hua Kong. Their representative detailed Jennifer's attempts to flirt with Mr. Xie and his subsequent disgust. The recording ended with a sharp remark. "Tell your company's idiot assistant to stop taking cues from CEO romance novels. It's nauseating." As the recording played, Jennifer's face turned ghostly white. She was utterly exposed. Shrugging, I said, "I've done all I can. If you still want to fix this, Ryan, you can go apologize yourself." I left Ryan's office and headed to the restroom, where I opened an app on my phone. The app connected to a hidden camera I had installed in his office before leaving for Zhejiang. The feed showed Jennifer collapsing into tears the moment I left, clutching Ryan and babbling, "It wasn't like that. Mr. Xie misunderstood me." But Ryan, ever insecure and paranoid, didn't look convinced. His doubt must have terrified her because she suddenly dropped a bombshell. "Ryan, I'm pregnant with your child. How could I ever think of another man?" Her words lit up Ryan's face with joy. All his doubts evaporated as he pulled her into an embrace, reassuring her with gentle words. The sight made my stomach turn, watching the two of them embracing each other on the surveillance feed. My eyes turned icy cold. Ryan had wanted children throughout our 5 years of marriage, but I had always delayed, citing the company's rapid growth as a priority. Now, with Jennifer claiming to be pregnant, Ryan was overjoyed, and so was she. She clung to him, coaxing, "You should divorce Lily and marry me." Ryan frowned, his eyes dark with calculation. "Are you stupid? If I divorce her, the company will be split in half. Be patient. Once we find the right opportunity to deal with her, we'll get married." Jennifer's face lit up with admiration. "Ryan, you're so smart. I'll listen to you." I sat frozen, staring at the screen. The man I had shared a bed with for 10 years now openly plotted my demise. So, it wasn't Jennifer's idea. It was Ryan's. Very well. Let's see who wins this time. The private investigator worked quickly. Soon, I learned everything. Jennifer, the girl I had supported through school, had been involved with Ryan ever since she moved to the city for college. Armed with this evidence, I returned to the company. Ryan's solution to the Hua Kong debacle? To let it go. He claimed we had given Hua Kong enough benefits over the years, and dismissed the importance of salvaging the relationship. I feigned anger, staying home and refusing to return to work. Ryan seemed relieved, even putting Jennifer in charge of the sales department. However, Jennifer's incompetence quickly caused 2 more clients to pull out of their contracts. Ryan finally intervened, only to discover that she had unilaterally increased prices for both clients. Our contracts explicitly stated that any price adjustments required mutual agreement. Violating this gave the clients the right to terminate the agreements. Furious, Ryan stormed into her office. "Are you an idiot? How could you raise prices without approval? Do you have a brain?" Jennifer, unbothered by his anger, argued. I was thinking about the company's best interests. It was clear now. She wasn't misunderstanding instructions. She was simply stupid. But this time, Ryan wasn't in the mood for excuses. His face turned red with rage as he trembled, yelling at her until she cried. Meanwhile, I exchanged a knowing glance with Tom, one of our senior sales managers. Watching Ryan deal with Jennifer was deeply satisfying. He was finally reaping the consequences of his own bad decisions. But despite her mistakes, Ryan refused to fire her. Instead, he moved her out of sales and made her his assistant. I didn't object. I wanted to see if she truly only understood Ryan's instructions. Unfortunately, I gave her too much credit. On my second day back at work, Ryan erupted again. Jennifer, are you deaf? I told you to book a flight for early this morning. Who told you to book an evening flight? Jennifer, her eyes welling up with tears, stammered. I saw you were out late last night, so I thought it'd be too exhausting to leave early today. That's why I booked an evening flight. Ryan roared. I have a meeting in Shanghai this morning. A client meeting that's been scheduled for weeks. Who the hell waits for your convenience? Do you not understand human speech? Are you stupid? Jennifer's tears spilled over as she whimpered apologies. But Ryan's patience had run out. He pressed his hands to his temples, fuming silently. Tom and I exchanged amused glances, both feeling vindicated. Still, Ryan refused to fire her, instead assigning her to the reception desk. Tom, baffled by this, asked me why Ryan hadn't let her go yet. I just sneered, thinking it was time to reveal their sordid affair. That afternoon, I walked into the lobby to find Jennifer tearfully complaining to Ryan about her demotion. As I watched, they ended up in each other's arms, shamelessly clinging to one another. Without hesitation, I barged into Ryan's office, catching them red-handed. Jennifer was perched on Ryan's lap, engaged in activities that were beyond inappropriate. I screamed, drawing the attention of the entire office. Now I understand why you've tolerated her incompetence. The two of you have been sneaking around behind my back. I slapped Ryan hard across the face. You're a disgusting excuse for a man. Ryan, let's get divorced. I stormed out of the office, feigning heartbreak. As expected, Ryan refused to divorce me. He shifted all the blame onto Jennifer, claiming she had seduced him and that he never intended to marry her. You're the only one I love, he insisted. I knew the real reason he didn't want a divorce. Our company, built together, would be split in half. With me taking my share of the clients and resources, Ryan couldn't stomach that. He didn't want a divorce. He wanted to be a widower. How ironic. He wanted me dead, and I wanted him dead. After a few days of causing a scene, I pretended to forgive him. To appease me, Ryan even fired Jennifer. But I knew he was still keeping her close, secretly supporting her. She sent me messages from time to time, trying to provoke me, but I responded with screenshots of Ryan's affectionate words to me. I heard she was so upset that she had to be hospitalized for pregnancy complications. Ryan, pressured by his mother, who was desperate for a grandchild, had no choice but to accompany Jennifer to the hospital. I followed them there, bringing a team of private investigators. At the obstetrics department, I found Ryan, his mother, and Jennifer together. They tried to avoid me, but there was no escape. I stepped forward, feigning a breakdown, and questioned Ryan in a voice filled with grief and rage. Didn't you say you broke things off with this shameless mistress? Why are you still with her? Why are you both here? In the obstetrics department? Is she carrying your illegitimate child? Those few words were enough to make everyone around us realize what was happening. In a crowd filled with pregnant women, the disdain for mistresses was palpable. Whispers quickly turned into curses, and people started berating Ryan, Jennifer, and even my mother-in-law, who had accompanied them. Some bystanders recorded videos, and soon the footage went viral online. In this age of the internet, such scandals spread like wildfire. Ryan and Jennifer became public enemies, branded as a cheating scumbag and a home-wrecking mistress. Worse still, Jennifer's history surfaced. People uncovered that she was one of the students I had sponsored through college, and even more, that she had bullied others back in high school. The outrage only grew. How shameless can someone be? Taking advantage of someone's kindness and seducing her husband? She's disgusting. And bullying classmates in school? This woman should never have been helped in the first place. Let her rot in the mud where she belongs. The uproar online severely damaged the company's reputation, causing several clients to cut ties with us. Ryan was too afraid to meet with Jennifer anymore and stayed home to grovel before me. I, of course, pretended to forgive him. After all, if I didn't forgive him, how could I ensure he met his deserved fate? My supposed forgiveness convinced Ryan that I was a foolish woman who loved him too much to ever leave him. He even began to plot against me in the same way as in my previous life. One day, he casually mentioned that my car needed maintenance and offered to take it in himself. I smiled, nodding trustingly. Oh, right. Your car's due for maintenance, too. Why don't you take them both in? Ryan agreed, taking both cars to the shop. Watching him leave, I knew he had run out of patience and was planning to kill me just as he had before. The cars were serviced and returned the next day. When Ryan handed me the keys, I didn't miss the cold glint in his eyes. I pretended not to notice, got into my car, and drove away, leaving him looking puzzled. Moments later, he hurriedly got into his own car and drove off. I watched from a distance as his car careened off the elevated highway, crashing spectacularly. When the hospital called, I played the part of the devastated wife, rushing to his side in tears. Ryan survived the crash, but barely. He was now in a vegetative state, unlikely to ever wake up. It was perfect. When Jennifer heard the news, she screamed at me, accusing me of killing Ryan. I maintained my act as the heartbroken wife and slapped her hard across the face. How dare you? Ryan wouldn't have been in such a hurry if it weren't for your call. If anyone's to blame for his accident, it's you. That moment, my mother-in-law, who had fainted upon hearing about Ryan's crash, woke up. She turned to Jennifer, her face twisted in rage, and slapped her even harder. You shameless woman. You ruined my son's life. I'll kill you. Jennifer collapsed to the ground, wailing in pain. But before my mother-in-law could hit her again, she froze. Realizing Jennifer was pregnant, she frantically called for the doctors, who managed to stabilize Jennifer and save the baby. I watched the scene unfold, stunned by my mother-in-law's reaction. You knew about Ryan and her all along, didn't you? I demanded. She sneered. You refused to give Ryan a child. Why shouldn't someone else step in? So now that she's the reason Ryan's a vegetable, you're okay with that too? I asked coldly. Her face went pale. But despite her anger, she knew that the child Jennifer carried was Ryan's only heir. She wouldn't dare do anything to harm her. Jennifer, however, wasn't done. She pointed at me and screamed. It wasn't me. It was her. She's the one who caused Ryan's accident. She's the real killer. I stared at her, feigning confusion. What do you mean by that? Jennifer's panic was evident. She and Ryan had planned to kill me, but fate turned the tables. She didn't know that I had anticipated their scheme from the start. Ryan and I had identical white Mercedes-Benz cars, down to nearly identical license plates. His ended in '69, while mine ended in '96. After my rebirth, I meticulously planned to switch our cars. I made subtle changes to the interior of his car to match mine and ensured that when he picked up the cars from maintenance, he'd unknowingly take the one rigged with his own trap. Jennifer's fury boiled over. Ryan was driving your car. You're the one who killed him. My mother-in-law's eyes widened as realization dawned. She grabbed me by the arm, screaming, Was Ryan driving your car? Answer me. I looked at her calmly. Yes. She lunged at me, clawing and sobbing. I sidestepped her attack, hearing her scream about calling the police. Call them, I said, unbothered. Jennifer's face paled at the mention of the police. She immediately tried to deflect. Mrs. Campbell, let's not involve the police. What matters now is getting her out of the company and making sure she doesn't take over Ryan's assets. I smirked. How could we not report this? You accused me of killing Ryan, didn't you? Let the police investigate and find out the truth. My mother-in-law, desperate to avenge her son, insisted on calling the authorities. Jennifer's panic was palpable. Before she could stop anything, the police arrived. The investigation into the accident had already begun, and it didn't take long for them to confirm that the brakes had been tampered with. My mother-in-law turned ghostly pale, staring at me with hate-filled eyes. You vile woman. You killed my son. You monster. I'll kill you, my mother-in-law screamed, lunging at me once again. This time, the police restrained her before she could reach me. Mrs. Chun, please calm down, said a young female officer. We will get to the bottom of this. Let us handle it. The officer turned to me, her sharp gaze focused. Miss Taylor, we've discovered that the car involved in the accident is registered in your name. Can you explain why your husband was driving it? I blinked back tears, feigning grief as I recounted the story. My husband and I often drove each other's cars by mistake. I never imagined that the car, which had just been serviced, would have tampered brakes. Please, officers, you have to find the truth. The officer's expression grew serious, sensing there was more to the situation. Have there been any recent conflicts between you and your husband? I glanced coldly at Jennifer, then answered. She used to work for my company. She's also my husband's mistress. We were in the process of divorcing because of her. The police took Jennifer and the car service employees in for questioning. It didn't take long for the truth to surface. Ryan had ordered the brakes on my car to be tampered with. What none of them expected was that he would end up as the victim instead. I continued playing the role of the devastated wife. My mother-in-law was inconsolable, and Jennifer couldn't accept the outcome. Yet neither of them had a choice. Jennifer, desperate to secure her position, decided to wait until her child was born to claim part of the family assets. I smirked at her naivety. That's assuming the child survives. Of course. Jennifer paled, knowing exactly what I meant. The blows my mother-in-law had delivered earlier had already caused her pregnancy to become unstable. Sure enough, when she was 5 months along, a stray dog startled her on a desolate street, causing her to miscarry. By the time she was rushed to the hospital, it was too late to save her womb. When I received the news, I was busy restoring the company's reputation. Clients who had severed ties during Ryan's scandals were gradually returning, including Hua Kong. Within a few months, the company was not only back on track but thriving like never before. I barely spared a thought for Jennifer's misfortune. One evening, as I left work and headed to the parking lot, I encountered her. She looked haggard, her body frail and her eyes filled with venom. She screamed and lunged at me with a knife. But I was prepared. My bodyguard subdued her before she could get close. Pinned to the ground, Jennifer glared at me with unbridled hatred. Lily Taylor, you were the one who should have died. Should have been you. Why was it Ryan who ended up like this? It's all your fault. You're the one who turned him into a vegetable. I looked down at her with cold disdain. How is it my fault? Wasn't it you? Weren't you and Ryan the ones plotting against me? Did you think I didn't know? That I would let you kill me without a fight? Jennifer's eyes widened in shock. You knew? You knew about our plan. I chuckled darkly. Of course I knew. Did you really think I'd just sit back and let you two kill me? I grabbed her chin and leaned in closer. Jennifer, I should thank you. Without you, I might have had to divorce him, losing half of my assets in the process. Now, the company is all mine. Jennifer thrashed beneath the guards, screaming, You venomous B****. I'll call the police. You won't get away with this. I smirked. Go ahead. The internet was right. Someone like you should never have been helped. I would have been better off donating to a dog. Her face contorted in fury as she screamed. You were the one who took Ryan from me. You knew we loved each other, but you interfered. You're the real homewrecker. I released her and played an audio recording on my phone. Ryan's voice filled the air. She seduced me. I never cared about her. She's just an idiot I played around with. Did you hear that? I said mockingly. Even in bed. He was only using you. If he really loved you, why didn't he divorce me and marry you first? Jennifer broke down completely, sobbing hysterically. I called the police, but not before having my bodyguards search her thoroughly. I wasn't about to let her take me down with some hidden trick. When the police arrived, Jennifer insisted that I was responsible for Ryan's accident. Her accusations backfired as the investigation uncovered the plot she and Ryan had hatched against me. In the end, her charges compounded, and she was sentenced to a long prison term. She would never leave those walls. As for Ryan, He lay in a vegetative state for a year before passing away. I swear, I didn't do anything to him directly. I would just occasionally whisper in his ear about everything. How he wanted to kill me. How I wanted him dead too. And how everything had played out perfectly for me. Whether he could hear me or not. I didn't care. He simply couldn't hold on any longer. My mother-in-law, now a lonely widow, thought I would take care of her. Instead, I sent her to a rural nursing home far away, ensuring she wouldn't trouble me again. When she threatened to call the police, she was told that I had no legal obligation to care for her, and that placing her in a nursing home was already more than enough. Somehow, this gesture earned me praise online as a dutiful daughter-in-law. My reputation soared, and so did the company's. By the end of the year, we were preparing for an IPO in Hong Kong. What's mine is mine. No one can take it from me.